why captured SS soldiers were not treated like prisoners. A quiet street after the fighting has ended does not feel peaceful. Windows are broken. Doors hang open. There are no crowds celebrating, only scattered figures moving carefully through debris. Somewhere nearby, prisoners are being gathered. Some are young. Some wear uniforms without insignia. They wait without speaking, unsure whether the war has truly ended for them. For years, one organization had operated beyond ordinary limits. It had enforced ideology with discipline, fear, and repetition. When the state that created it collapsed, the men who belonged to it discovered that surrender did not mean safety. The central question is not whether violence occurred after the war ended. It is why, in so many places, captured SS soldiers were treated as something other than prisoners. What made entire armies, resistance groups, and civilians decide that some men no longer qualified for protection under the rules of war? To understand that decision, it is necessary to examine how the SS was formed, how it functioned, and what remained in its wake when the system finally broke apart. Germany in the early 1920s was a society without stability. Economic collapse was not theoretical, but immediate and constant. Money lost value within hours. Food shortages forced families to sell possessions simply to survive. Veterans returned from the First World War to find no work, no support, and little respect. Many young men grew up watching their parents fail despite effort, absorbing the idea that the nation itself had been humiliated and abandoned. This environment created fertile ground for radical ideas. The Nazi Party did not invent anger, but it organized it. It offered explanations that were simple, rigid, and absolute. Responsibility for suffering was assigned outward, never inward. Loyalty was framed as virtue, obedience as strength. Within this movement, a small protective unit formed in the mid-1920s. At first, it had no independent power. Its members acted as guards and assistants, not soldiers. That changed when Heinrich Himmler assumed control in 1929. He transformed the unit into something deliberately separate from the regular military. The goal was not battlefield success alone, but ideological reliability. Himmler envisioned an organization that would shape society internally, not just defend it externally. Racial doctrine, discipline, and personal loyalty to Adolf Hitler became central principles. Training reflected this purpose. SS recruits endured physical exhaustion combined with constant ideological instruction. They were taught that doubt weakened resolve and that empathy interfered with duty. The process narrowed moral perspective rather than expanding it. Where conventional soldiers were trained to evaluate situations, SS men were trained to suppress hesitation entirely. This conditioning separated them psychologically from both civilians and regular army units. By the early 1930s, the SS had grown rapidly and portrayed itself as elite. Training schools emphasized purity, superiority, and obedience. Recruits rehearsed scenarios involving civilian control, forced compliance, and collective punishment. These exercises were not meant to prepare them for traditional combat. They prepared them to enforce policy without question. When war began in 1939, this conditioning moved from theory to practice. In Poland, SS units followed advancing armies, operating behind the front lines. Their role was not security in the conventional sense. It was elimination. Einsatzgruppen carried lists identifying individuals and groups marked for death. Killings took place in courtyards, forests, and open fields, often within days of occupation. These actions followed a consistent pattern. Victims were gathered, transported, and shot according to orders that were written, planned, and reported. Numbers were recorded. Responsibility was divided across roles, making it easier for individuals to distance themselves from outcomes. Killing became a task to complete rather than an act requiring reflection. As Germany expanded eastward in 1941, the scale increased dramatically. Einsatzgruppen operated across the Baltic states, Ukraine, and Belarus. Entire communities were destroyed in a matter of hours. Mass graves became common. Survivors were left without homes, families, or protection. Violence was repeated so frequently that it became routine. In Western Europe, methods differed, but objectives remained the same. SS units worked with security police to arrest resistance members and civilians. Raids emptied neighborhoods overnight. In Italy, after the change of sides in 1943, SS reprisals destroyed villages accused of supporting partisans. Entire populations were treated as expendable. Alongside these operations, the SS built and controlled a vast camp system. Early camps were framed as detention centers for political opponents. Over time, they evolved into instruments of systematic destruction. Camps served multiple purposes: punishment, forced labor, and extermination. Commandants enforced regimes designed to exhaust prisoners physically and psychologically. By the later years of the war, tens of thousands of camps and subcamps existed across Europe. Some supplied labor to factories and mines. Others existed solely to kill. Guards were trained to follow routine without deviation. Cruelty became normalized through repetition. Death became an expected outcome rather than an exception. As Germany's military situation deteriorated, SS violence intensified rather than receded. Retreats were accompanied by destruction. Civilians were punished for suspected disloyalty. Entire families were killed during withdrawals through Italy and France. In Belgium, captured enemy soldiers were executed instead of detained. These actions were deliberate, not spontaneous. These patterns shaped how the SS was perceived by opposing forces. Allied soldiers encountered burned villages, massacre sites, and camps filled with dead and dying prisoners. The distinction between combatant and criminal blurred. Surrender, which normally ended hostilities, lost meaning when SS units were involved. By late 1944 and early 1945, this perception hardened. On the Eastern Front, Soviet soldiers advanced through regions emptied by SS operations. Mass graves were visible reminders of systematic killing. Many Red Army units concluded that SS fighters would not be treated as ordinary prisoners. The same dynamic appeared in the West. When Allied forces liberated camps, they encountered evidence that overwhelmed expectations. Train cars filled with bodies, survivors barely alive. Guards attempting to escape or disguise themselves. In these moments, discipline often gave way to immediate reaction. Some SS guards were shot during capture attempts or while trying to flee. After Germany surrendered, danger did not immediately disappear. Many SS members tried to evade identification. They removed insignia, altered uniforms, and destroyed documents. However, distinctive markers and Allied intelligence efforts exposed thousands quickly. Screening processes separated suspected SS members from other prisoners. In areas that had endured occupation, local responses were often swift and violent. Resistance fighters and civilians recognized individuals associated with previous atrocities. In some cases, identification alone led to execution. These actions were not coordinated through formal legal systems. They were driven by accumulated trauma, fear, and the absence of stable authority. In Eastern Europe and the Balkans, the situation was particularly volatile. Partisan groups that had fought the SS for years viewed captured members as ongoing threats rather than defeated soldiers. Executions occurred without trials. The line between retaliation and prevention was often unclear, even to those carrying it out. Post-war SS resistance groups reinforced this perception. Small cells continued sabotage and attacks after surrender. Though limited in scale, these actions convinced many Allied units that some SS members remained committed to violence regardless of defeat. Capture was seen as a risk rather than a resolution. Investigations in liberated territories revealed the full extent of SS crimes. Underground factories where forced laborers died in large numbers. Facilities used for medical experimentation. Sites designed specifically for killing civilians, deemed unfit to live. Each discovery added to the belief that the SS was not simply a military formation that had exceeded limits. This understanding culminated in the declaration of the SS as a criminal organization. Responsibility was assigned collectively, not only to leaders, but to the system itself. Membership implied participation, whether direct or indirect, in crimes carried out on an enormous scale. Yet outcomes still varied. Many SS members were captured, imprisoned, and tried. Others were killed during arrest attempts or by local groups acting independently. There was no single policy governing their treatment in the immediate aftermath of collapse. What united these events was a shared belief held by soldiers and civilians alike, that the SS represented a form of violence that did not end with surrender. This belief, whether accurate in every case or not, shaped behavior during a period when legal order had not yet been restored. History does not offer a clear resolution. The SS was dismantled, its leaders tried, its crimes documented. Yet the aftermath reveals how deeply violence can alter expectations of justice and restraint. What remained was not closure, but silence, broken only by the knowledge that systems built on dehumanization rarely disappear without leaving scars on those who survive them.